on, girl, let's scream.
I am a god.
No, please don't kill me, Mr. Ghostface. I want to be in the sequel. This is the part where you run.
Come on, scream.
Hello, and welcome to Let's Scream, a podcast where we dive into our favorite horror movies. I'm Parker.
I'm Stevie.
And today we are looking at 1974's The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, directed by Tobe Hooper. Join us as we journey to Texas and we learn all about chainsaw massacres. Are you ready to scream?
Come on, girl. Let's
scream.
Hey. Oh my god, we're on the road
We're on the road. So sorry if the volume sucks or the audio sucks. I don't know what to do about that, but it's quite appropriate.
It's very appropriate for this movie. I was thinking about that when I was watching it. I was like, if we do this one on the road, it's just like these kids.
Exactly. We're just like Sally and Franklin and all of them going in our... We're not driving a Scooby-Doo van like they are.
No.
But we're going to Chicago to see Mariah Carey.
I'm so excited. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, everybody. So... we thought it would be the perfect time to do a Texas Chainsaw podcast. Before we get into the spoiler talk, there's a lot to unpack with this movie.
Yes, watching it, I was... Okay, well, first of all, I do need to point out, I think this is my first time ever watching it fully through. I knew everything that happened in this movie. I knew a lot of the scenes in this movie, but I think I've just seen so many, like, people talk about this movie and so many, like, videos analyzing this film that I'm like, I've basically seen it.
Yeah.
But, like, I knew everything that happened, but I was like, I don't think I've ever sat down and watched this full movie. But I loved it. I thought it was very good. It's
amazing.
It holds up very well shot, very scary still, I think. I liked it. So.
I adore this movie.
And I love all the theories. I know there's so many theories with this film.
Yeah, so that's what... Before we get into the plot, I do want to go over, this movie has so much scholarly, analysis done on it, all the time. Mm-hmm. People have theorized. It's kind of like The Shining. They're both kind of movies that have been theorized over. And
we should do The Shining. I do like that.
Well, we should do The Shining. That's so good for this time of year, too. Lots of snow and...
Yes. Okay.
But, yeah, it's one of those that has so many different metaphors and analogies. We obviously can't get into all of them on this podcast.
No.
Let's Scream is very, we talk about the plot.
Yeah.
We yoss around.
Yes.
We're not really getting into the subtext as much.
No.
But I do kind of want to go over... a lot of the different, shit that I've seen about it online and different YouTube videos and articles that I've read, because it's such a multifaceted movie. It's so layered. And although the story is very simple, it is shot so well, and there's so many cool tricks that they do, that it really gets your thinker going.
Yes.
You know? A lot to discuss. And this is from 1974, and we're also doing a movie from the 70s, actually from this very same year as this movie, next week on the pod.
Yes. We'll get into that
which
later.
We'll get into later. But I do have to kind of give a background on 70s horror, because it's still in the early years of, contemporary cinema.
Yes.
And... I think it should be noted that 70s horror is especially gritty and kind of weird and gruesome and graphic.
Especially because, a lot of 60s and 50s were more psychological.
Yeah.
Also, films... The film industry, goes through periods of, especially in the early years, it was not super successful, 50s and 60s. People just didn't want to go to the movies anymore.
Right. Psycho was kind of the birth of contemporary horror as we know it. It sparked this whole,
Because before it was probably a lot more, monster horror.
Yeah, you got the Universal monster movies, which we should definitely review at some point. I love them. Especially that... I really like the original Nosferatu.
Yes.
We should do it at some point. And the original Phantom of the Opera. The silent film. I think
There's
they're both great.
There's a lot of Phantom of the Operas we could do. We could always do.
Yeah.
We'll go over it.
We could have a Phantom of the Opera series, honestly.
There's so many different versions of that movie.
But yeah, and the reason for this kind of graphic nature of the 70s films in general is it's written about a lot that it was mainly influenced by the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
The fact that reporters with cameras were being sent out and we were getting, real footage of wartime atrocities on the news all the time.
And it was just people were very desensitized to it.
Exactly. And this movie does have a lot to say about Vietnam, which we will get into.
Yes.
I kind of wrote down some examples of the different allegories. Just a couple here to mention before we get into it. Again, this movie has been interpreted so many different ways.
And probably so many ways it still can be interpreted. Right.
I wrote, obviously, we have the mistrust of America towards our government during the Vietnam War. The horrors of the meat industry and slaughterhouse practices. Cosmic intervention, apocalyptic dread, the economic crisis of the 70s, societal repression, critique of family values and structure, and the dangers of capitalism, just to name a few.
Yes.
Yeah, you can go even further into examination.
Yes.
I'm sure that there's another take out there that could work for this movie. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so keep that in mind. And I did write some examples down along the way of just some metaphors that I noticed. But we'll get to them. And at this point forward, we are going to be discussing the plot beat by beat like we do on this very fine podcast.
Yes. So spoilers coming up.
Yep. Spoiler alert. Go watch the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the OG, and then come back and review the movie with us. So let's get into it. Our movie starts. We get this opening crawl of text, kind of like in Star Wars.
Yes.
When you see the text kind of scrolling up the frame.
Basically telling us that these events are a true story. They're not. At all.
Right away, we get lied to.
Yeah. And people try to say that this is inspired by Ed Gein, I believe.
Right.
Even the director says, no, that's just coincidental. But I still see a lot of people saying it's highly inspired, and he said it was really coincidental.
Well, if you don't know who Ed Gein is, Ed Gein was a serial killer who played arts and crafts with his corpses.
Yes. And would turn their body. He would basically use every part, very similar to what we'll see in this movie. Yeah. And would make masks out of people's skin, which is disgusting and
I'm
terrifying.
sure that even though maybe he didn't intend to be inspired by Ed Gein, maybe subliminally he was. Because that was just a crazy, fucked up case. But yeah, it tells us that it was based on true events. It was not, but it is kind of a cool, the first time you watch it and you don't realize that, you're like, wait, what? This was based on true events? What the fuck? And
this just kind of started, I feel like, I don't know if this was the first movie to do this of horror movies, but this started a trend of a lot of horror movies being like, this is true. By the way, just so before you watch this is true.
Yeah.
This actually happened. So.
And most of the time it's like,
no.
Not true. But okay.
Paranormal Activity tried to say it was true. The Strangers.
Yeah.
There's other very obscure films that will do it too. I'm this is real. And
it's definitely become a cliche, and it did start with this movie, which is pretty cool.
That's the thing. This movie, I think, started a lot of cliches.
It is.
But they don't feel cliche in this film. None of them. They work so well in this film.
I think that's because this movie, along with the movie we're going to talk about next week, are credited with literally creating the slasher genre. So it kind of did birth some cliches, but it doesn't follow every one of them because it's kind of the first of its kind. Such a great movie. We get these flashes of desecrated corpses. And there's this, every time we get a flash of it, it plays this kind of, I wrote it sounds like a tornado siren.
The music is so good in this film.
It's
because I think the director, he also co-composed the music for this.
Yeah, Toby Hooper, he co-composed. Sound effects are really, they're not like you hear in any other scary movie. Mm-hmm. They're very unique to this movie. Very unsettling. And we get this, we're in a graveyard and we get a slow zoom out of a pair of corpses that have been desecrated.
And placed in this very strange.
It's kind of
ritualistic.
Ritualistic.
Because the one, he's basically in a T pose, and then the head of the other one is in his lap or something.
We hear a radio announcer telling us about how these bodies were dug up from the graveyard.
Yes.
Yeah, we get our opening credits. We get the newscaster continuing to report very disturbing news that had been going on that day. Talks about a cholera outbreak, workers dying in an oil rig explosion, violence and suicide in Houston. And while he's going on and on about all these terrible news stories, we see close up on images of solar flares as like kind of the background. And I mentioned cosmic or like divine intervention in
that was what I
the beginning
in this movie. Was like the ties to astrology and the universe and the energy of the planet and the star and the sun.
Yeah. So the sun, it's all these solar flares.
The sun is a huge motif throughout this film. Same with the moon.
Yeah.
Once it turns night.
Yes.
And we'll get into why that
get into
is.
that. And then we fade to we're on a highway in Texas and we see an armadillo lying dead on its back. Some roadkill.
Very nasty.
Very nasty. And then a van of teens drive by. They're in like kind of a Scooby-Doo van.
Yes.
Green
70s.
Scooby-Doo van.
It's the 70s, yo.
Yeah. And we're introduced to our characters.
Groovy, man.
We first see Franklin, who uses a wheelchair, and they kind of like help him out on a ramp so he can go pee. And then this car drives by and like scares him or something, and he like falls down.
Rolls all the way fucking down the hill.
Franklin isn't quite a character. He's a sensitive boy.
He's my least favorite character in this
He's a
movie.
little annoying.
I wonder if the like wheelchair thing was like make us feel sympathetic towards him, but he's so unbearable this film. For me,
he's kind of a wet blanket. I don't know. I empathize with Franklin because we do see like the struggle of, you know, what it's like for him compared to the others, especially when they're at the house later and he has to navigate the downstairs of the house. So that sucks. But yeah, we get the impression that this is just a miserably hot day in Texas. And this movie is like, again, like it's all these movies in the 70s, like your Black Christmas, your Halloween, your Last House on the Left. They all have this like home video quality to them. The film is very grainy. And it gives you like should I even be watching this? And it almost feels very like this world that this movie takes place in feels kind of apocalyptic. Yeah, it's like blisteringly hot. There's like barely any like people around. They're kind of out in the middle of nowhere. It gives me like The Walking Dead. Vibes, like post-apocalyptic.
Post-apocalyptic. Where they kind of, you can like see the heat almost in the film.
And we meet the rest of our teens while they're on the road. The driver is Jerry, who has like aviator glasses, little fro. Flared jeans and like flared tee, kind of very like disco inspired,
very 70s, like just 70s. He's the character. The costume designer was like, okay, we need to convey to the audience that this is like contemporary. This is the 70s. So Jerry, you get like the little afro. We get Pam, who is our kind of hippy dippy. Girl, she's always talking about horoscopes. She's talking about horoscopes.
We
need Sally, who's dating Jerry.
Yeah, well, do we know? Well, we don't really know who's dating who. It's kind of implied that Sally and Jerry kind of like each other, and that Kirk and Pam kind of like each other. But we don't get like too descriptive when it comes to our characters. You know, we just get little bits and pieces here and there. And Sally's, she's our main character. She's like one of the first final girls.
And she's
of
Jerry's
all time.
Sister. Or not Jerry's, she is Franklin's sister. She's blonde. She's very sweet, kind. Patient. And then we get Kirk, and his defining feature is lots of chest hair. He's cute. He is.
He's always got his shirt unbuttoned, and he is always showing off.
And it's
nice chest fro. We like it.
It's very nice.
And
Are we still talking about beavers?
Wait, are we talking about beavers? Ew. Pam is reading a book about astrology, and she says that Saturn is in retrograde, which is in fact evil.
Yeah.
Saturn is a bad influence, but it is a particularly bad influence right now.
Yeah.
She says.
And then Jerry asks her to look up Capricorns because Sally is a Capricorn.
Mm-hmm.
And we learn that Capricorns, which I'm a Capricorn, are ruled by Saturn, and so in retrograde, that's not good.
Yeah.
And basically she says that she's going to have a day that's going to basically feel like a nightmare.
She says there are moments where we cannot believe that what is happening is really true. Pinch yourself, and you may find out that it is. And we find out what they're doing, where they're going to. They're stopping at a cemetery because... Well, they're stopping at the cemetery where those corpses got, like, dug up.
Because Sally and Franklin's grandfather was buried there.
So they're like, let's make sure that Grandpa's body wasn't one of the ones that got dug up.
Yes. And we never really kind of learn if he was or not.
They say that it looked like it wasn't.
Yeah. But Franklin's like not convinced.
Yeah.
It really doesn't play into the plot though.
Well, it might.
I mean, yeah, maybe.
Maybe their grandpa was one of those ritualistic corpses that were dug up.
We'll never know.
That's another thing about this movie is that like it hints at this kind of mysticism, but it never like fully tells us one way or the other.
Yeah.
It's just kind of spooky.
Yeah.
This movie's so scary. I love it. And while Sally's going with the guy to like check on the grave, the rest of them are like chilling by the van, and this crazy old drunk man is lying on the grass, and he's like slinging his beer bottle around, and he goes, "Things happen hereabout, they don't tell. I see things. You see, they say it's just an old man talking. You laugh at an old man. There's them that laughs and knows better." Which, like, okay. They're like,
okay, thanks, John.
What are you saying? But it's kind of a weird foreshadowing. Like, this movie's a lot of warnings and foretellings of what's to come. And
if it seems creepy, it is creepy.
And I wrote down, this is probably one of the original, like, Harbinger of Doom characters. It's a cliche in horror movies.
And it's always like a drunk.
Where it's this crazy old man warning you about something. Like, don't go there. That place is haunted.
Into the spooky cellar.
Yeah. Whatever you do, don't look in the pink furry box.
Whatever you do, don't look inside this big pink furry box.
And yeah, then the group leaves the cemetery and they continue on the road, and they pass this really foul-smelling slaughterhouse.
Yes.
And Franklin actually recognizes it as the one where their grandpa would sell their cattle.
I want to talk about Franklin first. He keeps talking about how his uncle and grandpa... No, because he keeps mentioning that their uncle works at a slaughterhouse and the grandpa would sell to the slaughterhouse they were passing by. But he keeps mentioning about their uncle working at a slaughterhouse as if it's interesting. And it's not, Franklin. But he keeps bringing it up, like, consistently. And it's like, Franklin, no one cares.
He goes into very graphic detail. He says... he kind of describes what happens to the cattle when they're slaughtered. And this really gets into, I think, honestly, the biggest theme in this movie, the one that's the most obvious, is the, like, this is a metaphor for, like, how we treat animals in the, like, meat industry.
Yeah.
And he says that they use a sledgehammer to kill the cattle. And he says oftentimes the cattle needs to be beat several times in the head before they actually die.
Yeah.
Nowadays, they just use this air gun that shoots a bolt into the animal's skull and then retracts it, like... And he's making everyone, like...
kind of grossed out.
Yeah, grossed out.
Stop talking.
And honestly, I think... I like Franklin. I think that he's annoying, but I think you can tell that it's just a really hot day, and they're all exhausted. You can tell it's been a really long day. We know that they're going to visit their... old, like Grandpa's old house where they kind of grew up in.
Yeah.
And they kind of don't really know where they're going. And yeah, again, just heat exhaustion maybe. And this is when the group decides to pick up a hitchhiker.
They're like, oh my god, hitchhiker, should we get it? And so I think it's Pam was like, no, he's creepy looking, don't get him. I'm on Pam's side. Because here's the thing, as soon as you picked up that hitchhiker, I'm gonna say these kids, they signed their death warrant pretty early on in this film.
Yeah.
Why would you pick that? No!
Especially this hitchhiker, because he looks crazy.
People were trying to, like, I guess this is like a big thing in the 70s, is like people were very rebellious, didn't really, like, you didn't have a reason to not trust people.
Yeah.
As much. Like, people had this too much blind trust, which I think this was also a critique on it, is it's like, don't just have this blind trust in people all the time.
That's definitely
strangers.
A very
Why
valid...
would you pick up a hitchhiker?
Yeah. Very valid metaphor as well, I think, could play into this. This guy's fucking weird.
That's so fucking weird.
He has all this roadkill, like, jewelry.
And, like, bags and pelts.
And pelts made out of, like, dead squirrels and shit. And he's got this really long birthmark on the side of his face, which I thought was blood the first time I watched this. But he tells them that the slaughterhouse is where his family used to work. His whole family's been in meat, he says. And Franklin says, I think we just picked up Dracula. And the guy keeps talking, and Franklin later goes, I guess it's a whole family of Draculas. Which is foreshadowing.
Yep.
Of course. And Franklin says, so have you seen that room with the air gun where they, like, kill the cattle with? And Hitchhiker says, oh, no way. The old way with the sledgehammer is better. The new way people put out of jobs. Which I think is what happened to his family. Because, well, we'll get into it. But that's definitely foreshadowing. The whole first half of this movie might just be called Foreshadowing the Movie.
Foreshadowing 101.
Yeah, literally. He starts showing them these Polaroid pictures that he took of his slaughterings at the slaughterhouse. And then he snatches up Franklin's pocket knife and he slices his own hand open.
And everyone's like, ew, what are you doing, weirdo? Ew!
I would have kicked his ass out.
And then fucking Jerry, who's driving, like, Pam's like, oh my god, he just cut his hand. He's like, wait, really? It's like, Jerry's not paying attention.
Jerry's disassociating, yeah.
His eyes are on the road, but it's like, how do you not hear all this screaming going on?
And, yeah, he's laughing maniacally, and everyone looks really freaked out.
And then he, like, snaps a picture.
Yeah, takes a picture of Franklin. And then he goes, you can pay me $2 for this picture now.
And Franklin's like, it's not that good of a photo. I don't want it.
But, you know,
like,
I respect the hustle. I respect
it's a good picture.
the side hustle, though.
God, no, that's like...
it's hard out here for a young photographer trying to make it.
If anyone ever goes to Vegas, side note, and you're walking on the main strip, there are people who will walk around with, like, bracelets and jewelry, and they'll put it on your hand, like your wrist, and then they're like, okay, now give me $5 for it. And it's like, bitch, no.
They learned that from the hitchhiker.
They learned it from this dude. He's like, I'm just going to do it, and then you have to pay me.
And, yeah, they're like, no. And then he takes the picture, and he lights it up with a firecracker. And while everyone's like, freaking out from the firecracker, he pulls out a knife from his pocket and he starts cutting Franklin's arm really deep. And it's like, holy shit. So they start, you know, at this point, they're like, okay, get his ass out of here.
They kick him out and he, like, rubs his bloody hand.
He kind of makes a marking in the blood.
On the blood, yeah. It's very weird, but it's like also, it looks like a marking, but it could also be not a marking.
Sure.
I think
it's a marking.
I think it's supposed to be ambiguous a little bit. I don't think the marking meant anything, but I think him marking their car with blood was more something. I don't think what he drew was supposed to be something.
I would argue it could be a part of a ritual. I think there's a lot of ritualistic things going on.
Yeah, it's a very strange film.
Almost like witchy kind of vibes I get, but we'll get more into that.
There's so much to this film that I really like. It's not as just like simple as people think. It's not just gore.
And they're going down they kind of like kick him out and they're going down and he's just like blowing raspberries,
screaming at them.
And Jerry goes, that's the last goddamn hitchhiker I ever pick up. Which is ironically true.
Yeah.
It is going to be the last hitchhiker he ever picks up. Yeah. And then they stop at a gas station and the owner says, I got no gas. And apparently this is a real correlation to what was going on in the 70s. Because there was an oil crisis during that year of 1973 because of the Arab-Israeli war. And basically OPEC, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, if you know what that means, placed this embargo on the United States in sort of like retaliation for the U.S. resupplying Israel's like military supplies. Which I thought that was maybe a little tolerable.
Yeah.
Result, you know,
odd.
continuing conflict even to this day, still going on there. And the gas station owner, who's kind of got messed up teeth guy.
Yeah.
I think he has a name in the sequels. They give this character a name.
Yeah, he's just referred to like.
I think he's the cook.
He's the cook.
The cook. Okay. So the cook says.
The cook.
Cook says, I ain't got no gas, but I do have some barbecue I can offer to you.
Yeah.
And
basically tells them that gas will either be there later today or tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
He doesn't really know.
And they're like, shit, we should have filled that back at the last stop.
Yeah.
And while they're waiting in the van, Franklin is kind of contemplating what it must have taken for the hitchhiker to be able to cut himself like that.
Yeah.
He says, do you think I said something that made him mad? And Jerry's like, you're crazier than he was, Franklin. I love the accents in this movie.
Yeah, they're really good.
Yeah, and then Sally kind of notices that strange marking on the van, and they're like, what the fuck is that? But they go on their way. They continue to the old Franklin house, and they're eating that barbecue that the cook gave them. And they get to the Franklin house, and it's pretty gross and like dilapidated.
Yeah.
It's like an old farmhouse.
Like nobody's been there for years. It's just abandoned, run down as hell.
At one point, Kirk sees this nasty nest of spiders, and they play this gross, like, crawling sound effect that I hate.
They were also, like, I think this was also, like, this whole scene kind of makes you feel like something's supposed to happen.
Yeah.
But, like, nothing happens.
And poor Franklin, is having issues navigating in his wheelchair the, like, bottom half of the house, and he's frustrated because they're all upstairs, and they kind of just, like, leave him by himself. And
he starts smelling a bunch of raspberries.
Yeah, he starts, like, kind of copying the hitchhiker.
And basically saying, like, he kind of gets into this whole talk of, like, he didn't really want to go.
Yeah.
And they kind of dragged him along, convinced him it would be fine. And so you're getting this vibe that he doesn't want to be there, but I don't know.
He then discovers a weird nest of, like, bones and feathers.
They're set up in a very ritualistic way.
Yeah. Witchy again. It reminds me of Blair Witch.
Yeah, and then he is yelling for Sally, and he, like, looks up and, like, sees even more bones, like, hung up again.
From their doorway.
Like, in a very ritualistic way.
I think that there's some witchcraft going on.
Yeah.
In this. They never confirm it.
Yeah.
But it is very, like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then this is when Kirk and Pam decide to go and explore. They're going to find the old watering hole to go swimming.
Yes.
Because they're kind of horny for each other.
Yeah.
And Pam, I noted, is wearing, like, the shortest shorts I've ever seen.
Her outfit is really cute.
It is really cute.
Like, 10 out of 10.
She's got, like, that open back.
She's got the, like...
Are they overalls? Is that what it is?
No, it's just, like, it's like a bodysuit.
A little
And it's, like, a halter, like, bodysuit. And then she's wearing, like, her little red cutoff shorts. She just looks... And it's an open back on the shirt, or on the bodysuit. It's very cute. Very cute.
Yeah. But, of course, this is the apocalypse, so all of the water is dried up in this watering hole. But they do hear...
Generators, or like cars or something.
They hear the sound of a generator. And Kirk exclaims, gasoline! So they decide to venture on over to this farmhouse where they hear the generator coming from.
And there's a bunch of cars running, which is weird.
Bunch of cars. No, they're not running. The generator's running.
Oh.
It's this, like, looks like a junkyard of just a bunch of abandoned cars from all different years. Where did those cars come from, Stevie?
We'll get into it.
We'll get into it. But they don't think anything about that. And Kirk's like, maybe I can sell them my guitar for some gas. Let's go knock on the front door. And
like, dude, they're not gonna sell us gas. Like, let's just leave.
And she's sitting on
the continues to be the smartest
Pam is
person in the movie.
the best character for sure. At least in this, like, first half of the movie.
She's like, girl. She's like, dude, no, they're not gonna sell us gas. They're not. I wouldn't.
And she's sitting on the front porch while Kirk knocks on the door. No one answers. And then Kirk sees a tooth lying on the porch, and he hands it to Pam to kind of fuck with her, and she's like, ew!
walks off. She's like,
Yeah.
bye, I'm leaving.
She's pissed. She goes and
She's like, let's
she
go.
sits on like this porch swing.
Yeah.
And this is when Kirk decides to let himself into the
Yeah,
house.
because he like knocks and then the door opens and then he just goes in. Which, okay, I'm sorry, you've been knocking and yelling and nobody has answered. There's no one home. There's no one home. Just assume
Who
no
do you
one's home.
think you are that you're just walking into somebody's house?
Why would you just walk into somebody's house like that? Hello?
Yeah.
Were you raised in a fucking barn? You don't just do that.
And we see, and like this is when we see kind of the entryway of the house.
And we see a bunch of like animal bones like hung up on the wall.
Yeah, all these like they're like cattle skeleton heads hanging on this like red wall in the background. And we also hear the sound of a pig squealing. And Kirk decides that he's going to continue on into the house, and the floor kind of like levels up a little bit, and he trips over it. He stumbles into that room with the bones, and then out pops our
Leatherface.
diva
Leatherface
of
like,
the
"Hey,
movie.
Diva. Hey, Diva. And
Leatherface was the one making the pig noises. We learn he's going
yeah,
And-
he squeals.
squealing.
Like, woo!
Leatherface wears, if you don't know what he looks like, he wears like a yellow apron. He's this big hulking guy. He carries a sledgehammer, and he's got a mask that is made out of someone's face. It is a human skin mask. And as quickly as he appears, he bashes Kirk over the skull just like a cattle.
And then does it one more time and
Yeah, and Kirk,
R.I.P.
yeah, because Kirk starts twitching on the ground. It's really disturbing.
yeah.
And then, Leatherface double taps him with that sledgehammer, and just like you have
R.I.P. Kirk. I had in my notes the crying emoji after R.I.P.
the
Kirk.
crying, his chest hair. Now we don't get any more hot, sexy
Yes.
Kirk
and so then
chest hair.
we then go back to Pam.
Well, first Leatherface drags his body into that room, and then he this like sliding metal door comes out of nowhere, and he just slams it, and we get this like boom sound effect that's really creepy.
Yeah.
It's maybe like one of my favorite parts of the movie. And Pam's like, on the swing, and she's calling for Kirk. She's like, where the fuck did Kirk go? And she starts making her way towards the front of the house, and we get this iconic shot
Of her walking towards the house.
It's like tracking her butt, basically,
Yeah.
like as she walks towards this, and the house is like in the background, and it's continuously zoomed in, and it's just so foreboding. It's like, oh no, girl, don't go,
Yeah,
don't
the girl,
do
go
it,
away,
Pam.
Go away.
She goes into the house.
And another thing about that we'll go into, but a lot of people who, when they die in this movie, they walk towards the sun.
Oh, do they?
There's a shot when they're first going to the house before Kirk, and they're walking. You can see the sun like in the background, like in the
Is
sky,
that like-
and they're like walking towards it
It's supposed to be them walking to their doom.
to their doom. Because it happens the same with like the moon. When
I never
and
noticed
so like
that.
I'm pretty sure in that shot she's like the sun is also in the shot.
Interesting.
Because we get a lot of shots of the sun, and this has to do with the whole like the sun is kind of keeping track of the time through this movie. Because we also see like when they first get to the gas station. Sorry to go back a little bit. There's like a gas station clerk, like attendant, who has no involvement in this movie, but he's like looking.
I forgot
and he's
about
like
him.
looking at the sun, kind of keeping track of like, oh, what time is it right now? Because you can tell by the position of the sun what time it is, and so. Yes, we'll get into that. But so she's walking towards the house, iconic shot.
She's kind of trips in the darkness, and she trips into this room that I called the Skellington room.
The Skellington room. The Jack Skellington room.
There's all these skeletons everywhere. And, well, she first notices a chicken in, like, a chicken cage hanging from the...
And then all the furniture is made of, like, bones.
She kind of starts to zero in, and she's like, oh, that chair is made out of skeletons. That lamp is made out of skeletons. I need to get the fuck out of the skeleton room.
And I really like this whole part, because, like, it really goes on for a bit. Of, like,
and I learned that this is all, like, real bones that they've happened to find for the production.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, wild. Pam starts freaking the fuck out, and she runs out the bone room, and then Leatherface appears from behind her and starts chasing her. And okay, I know I said my favorite shot
This
was
is
a little
another
earlier.
great shot.
This is my actual favorite shot of the movie. Pam runs out of the front door of the house, but she barely gets out that door before he grabs her and snatches her right back into the house. And Pam never leaves that house ever again. Because Diva down, because right after that, he takes her back into that room where he threw shut that sliding metal door. And there is a meat hook. And this is what inspired the meat hooks in the game Dead by Daylight.
Yeah.
This is where this comes from. He takes Pam's ass and hangs her, impales her on the back and hangs her on the motherfucking meat hook.
Yep.
Again, I noted, just like they do to cattle.
Yep.
And we actually don't see any of this gore, by the way. Like, we haven't noted that. This is... everything is shot very like, tastefully.
Well, because Toby Hooper wanted a PG rating, so he thought if he cut down the gore, it's still got an R rating.
Well, because it's just so disturbing.
Yeah.
Like, even without the gore, it's
I'm like,
too
dude,
creepy.
Maybe nowadays it'd probably be more PG-13.
Maybe,
probably,
yeah.
But, like, it was...
You kind of don't see any gore at all.
No.
It's all, like, shot out of frame, and it's
honestly,
implied.
The most brutal death isn't even, like, any of, like, what Leatherface does, in my opinion.
Yeah. So, yeah, and while she's hanging on this hook, she has no choice but to watch as Leatherface goes, and he winds up his chainsaw.
And cuts up Kirk's dead body.
He starts cutting up Pam's boyfriend right in front of her. Terrifying.
And then that's
yeah, we get this long shot of a windmill, like, running in circles right after that. Again, I think foreshadowing what's to come, because this is all cyclical. All these... There's a lot of, like, cyclical going back and forth, going in a circle that happens in this movie. Yeah, we're back at the Franklin house, and they can't find Franklin's knife, and he's kind of bitching about it.
Yep.
But then they're like, where the fuck are Pam and Kirk? Like, where did they go?
Yeah.
And Sally and Franklin are waiting by the van. And Franklin says, do you think Pam was right about all that astrology stuff? And this is when Sally says, I mean, everything means something, I guess.
She's a Capricorn diva, so she would know. She would know what's up.
But I love that line, because that's very the director being like, yeah, everything in this movie has a meaning to it.
Yeah.
You know? At least that's how I interpret it.
Yeah.
And this is when Jerry decides to go, and he is going to check on Pam and Kirk. And he decides to go investigate that old farmhouse.
Yeah.
While he's walking to his demise, and he is walking towards the sun.
It's a really good shot. There's a lot of great, beautiful shots, and this is a great shot. Jerry walking towards the house, and it's like sunset.
And we hear these, again, cool sound effects. It's like cymbals crashing.
Yeah. Because it's like we know he's like walking to his doom.
Pretty much,
We're like, dude, do not go to that house.
Jerry walks
it's also
up.
like, I mean, he's looking for his friends. He's like, what is he gonna do?
He has no reason to suspect what's going on. Jerry walks up and knocked on the farmhouse door. No one answers, but he does see Pam's jacket on the front porch. Yeah. So this prompts him to walk back up, and he calls out again, and we hear some giggling. Like, it's so creepy. I can't do it, but it's like, okay, you know what it is? You know, on Spy Kids, Gary giggles. Do you remember Gary and... Literally!
I forgot about that. They're like, he does that every time he just... Hey, Carmen.
But it's giving Gary giggles, and Jerry continues inside the house. I wrote, I'm so scared right now in my notes.
Yeah.
This scene is so scary.
Yes, this is a really well done scene, too.
He goes into the kitchen, or quote-unquote kitchen, where the meat hook was, and he starts to hear banging. And he realizes it's coming from a freezer. He opens the freezer, and it's Pam!
And she jumps up
Yeah.
For a second.
I wrote, she's still alive, but she's barely breathing.
Yep.
And Leatherface jumps out, and he clubs Jerry's skull right in. And he pushes Pam's ass right back into that freezer and slams the lid.
Jerry screams.
Yeah, Jerry's like, ah! Yeah.
It's a scream.
So scary.
And then
So Jerry's
This
done
when
for.
Leatherface then like goes into like the living room and like sits down and like,
Yeah.
has a moment for herself.
I wrote she's stressed out.
She's like, oh, all these people just keep walking in without permission.
Yeah, he's like, what the fuck? Poor.
Wait.
I like Leatherface.
Yeah, I'm like, he's just doing his thing.
Leatherface is a victim of his environment.
Yeah.
I think.
She did nothing wrong.
I think
She's
in the
just a diva.
in the zeitgeist, we kind of associate Leatherface as being this like crazy maniacal killer mastermind.
No.
He is just
These
like a
kids were just-
henchman, basically.
And these kids were just at the wrong place at the wrong time.
So we're back to the Franklin house, and the moon is out. So I wrote, it is Sally's time.
Yeah.
It is time for the Capricorn to
rise.
to finally rise and get her story arc. And we see that Franklin and Sally have now started to resorting to screaming out for Jerry.
Yeah.
And I wrote, it sounds like cattle mooing. They're like, Jerry, like kind of like that. Moo, I wrote. Again, this like metaphor of how we treat animals, how we
And
treat
they don't
cattle.
know. They just like
They don't know.
They don't know what's gonna happen.
And
Because yeah, that would make sense with like Jerry. He's just kind of like a cow being led to slaughter.
literally.
With his like, oh, I'm gonna go look for them. It's like, don't. Same with like Pam. Pam was a cow being led to slaughter.
Literally. And they're also drawing a lot of attention to themselves in this
Yes.
moment.
Oh my god. I was getting so like, oh my god, he's just gonna come out.
Yeah.
Like, why are y'all making all this noise? But again, they don't know.
Yeah. Well, Franklin is not feeling this vibe. He says, we need to get the fuck out of here.
Yeah.
Which I think he has a very valid point.
Yeah.
But Sally,
It's like, I'm not leaving without Jerry.
yeah, because, as we established earlier, Sally kind of has a thing for Jerry. And she's like, I'm going to go investigate. And then Franklin's like, well, let's just honk on the horn. He starts honking on the horn. Again, it sounds like a cow mooing.
Yeah.
The horn does. And she's like, no, we need to go. Like, I'm just going to go investigate. And she's like, give me the flashlight, Franklin. And he refuses. And he basically, like, kind of forces her to take him with her to go investigate. So poor Sally has to push his ass down this, like,
And this is
downhill.
where more the moon is comes into play of being like a symbol for kind of like Sally and what she sees going on, because when she's unsure, the moon is obscured with like clouds, and then when she like takes the like, nope, I'm going with or without you, I'm going with or without that flashlight, then the moon becomes clear because it's as if like her path has become clear. She's made her decision. This is what's happening.
So interesting.
So like the moon in this whole like sequence is very like, if you watch like shots of the moon are very like well used to other ones.
Crazy. And she's pushing Franklin through all these prickly leaves and shit, and he stops and he goes, wait, I hear something. And then we get my favorite jump scare, maybe of all horror. I love Leatherface jumping out with his chainsaw in this moment. I think that it is effective. I think the music doesn't telegraph it, so it's not like predictable.
Yeah.
I think it's such a great jump. And poor Franklin gets chainsawed in half.
R.I.P. Franklin. Okay, so with everyone else, with all the characters in my notes, when they died, I put R.I.P. like Pam, and then we'd have a little sad emoji, like this crying emoji. Franklin did not have a crying emoji. I was like, okay, yeah. Bye, Franklin.
Oh, she died? Oh, she passed away?
Aw.
Anyways.
All right.
Oh, she passed away? Oh. All right.
And again, we don't see any of this gore. We don't see Franklin getting chainsawed.
It's all from, like,
all
behind.
from
We're seeing
behind.
it kind of like from Sally's perspective of it.
It's all implied. But it's so effective.
Yes.
You don't need to see that. It's even scarier that we don't see it.
Yes.
Sally's actress, Marilyn Burns, who R.I.P., she passed away a few years ago.
Yes.
But she slays.
Oh my god.
The whole next half of this movie is just a tour de force performance of someone who is put in an absolutely terrifying scenario.
Yes.
she lets out this scream, and she puts her hands up over her head, and it's one of the most just anguishing, horrifying screams.
Yeah, definitely a scream queen. Definitely a scream queen.
And she starts running. And this is when we get Leatherface chasing Sally with
Great
his
chase
chainsaw.
sequence. This whole sequence
Great.
is so good.
One of my favorite chase sequences ever. He's chasing her through this like prickly wood, and she gets stuck in it a few times, but like the adrenaline kicks in each time, and she just charges through the prickly trees, and
her hair's getting caught.
Her skin's getting cut from the bristles, and but she just has to keep pushing through. And he's kind of slower behind her because he's taking the time to chainsaw. No, he's not walking. He's running.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
But he's just stopping to chainsaw his way through the trees. And this is when she approaches the farmhouse, which she's probably seeing as this like refuge. We know damn well. This is the last place she should be. Her ass should be running in right now.
So she's screaming for help.
He chases her around to the front door, and she goes inside and she locks him out. And so he has to starts
like just trying to cut his way through. Dude, you could have just kicked it down. You're big. But that's what I love about Leatherface. He's like, no, I am committed to this chainsaw. I am using the chainsaw.
He makes some cute little art on the front door. And while he's cutting down the door, she runs upstairs. And this is when we meet my favorite character of Texas Chainsaw. Grandpa! I love Grandpa. You first think that Grandpa is a fucking corpse because he's just sitting there rotted. He looks crazy.
There's sitting across from him is Grandma's corpse.
Probably Grandma's corpse. Which Grandma's corpse is definitely dead. She's like a skeleton.
Oh, she is nasty.
She's dead.
And so she runs out the room.
Yeah, they freak her out. She runs back downstairs just in time for Leatherface to cut through that door and chase her right back up the stairs.
And then she
jumps through a window.
It's such a good one. Such a good, like... And then this, I think, is another part where we get a shot of the moon, and we'll see the moon is blurry. It's because she got from that shock of, like, jumping.
That's so cool that you noticed that. I love that.
And so... Because we continue to get more shots of, like, the whole, like, cycle of the sun and the moon play a very big part in this movie. Of, like, again...
Yeah, it's kind of telegraphing where we're at in her story.
Yes.
Right? She jumps through a fucking window and falls down 2 stories. She has to pick herself up, muster that adrenaline to just keep running. He chases after her, and she has to re-enter the prickly trees. And at one point, she just runs smack her head right into a branch and falls over, knocks herself out.
This might have been when it got blurry. This might have been the shot, but
the sound of the chainsaw approaching wakes her ass right back up.
Yeah.
Time to run, keep running.
Yeah.
And he continues chasing her down the road, and she finds the gas station from earlier that they stopped at.
Yeah.
And she runs right into the gas station, and she runs right into the cook's arms.
Yeah.
This was the man that gave them the barbecue at the beginning of the movie.
Yeah.
And she's freaking out. Call the police! Call the police! Oh my God, call for help! Like, you could just feel her anguish.
Yeah.
She's still processing. He killed Franklin and Jerry. Like, she's literally...
Just at this point, it's like assuming the others are gone.
Yeah.
She's like, I don't know where anyone's
I don't know where anybody else is.
Yeah.
And he's comforting her and cradling her in his arms. And she's like, call the police, call the police. And he's like, there's no phone here. I'll have to drive over to the neighbors down the road and use their phone. I'll go get the truck. Stay right here. This is what I think the metaphor for the Vietnam War, where that comes into play, is this scene. Because we get this character that comforts Sally at first.
Yeah.
Then he leaves, and while he's gone, she looks over and realizes that barbecue that he had going, that he gave to them, people meat. He comes back, and he has a bag, and he has a rope.
And she's like, what the fuck are you doing?
And this is when we realize that he is a part of the very family that Leatherface is a part of. So, Tobe Hooper was very inspired by what was going on in United States history at that time. And it's crazy that we're reviewing this movie this week. Again, topical. Henry fucking Kissinger just passed away this week. Fuck him. So, if you don't know, Henry Kissinger was the Secretary of State. He was responsible for all this ridiculous war policy everywhere.
Huge war criminal.
Huge war criminal. And he was responsible for the U.S. war policy in Southeast Asia at the time that completely disregards civilian casualties. And as a result, hundreds of thousands of civilians are killed, injured, or displaced during the U.S.'s bombing of Cambodia towards the end of the Vietnam War.
Yes.
And this is right after Richard Nixon promises American citizens that he's going to end the war.
Yeah. And we also were getting like the Watergate scandal.
Yep.
So there was a lot in American politics going on.
A lot of distrust.
A lot of distrust.
And I think that completely ties into this scene with Sally being comforted by the cook, just as Americans were comforted by Richard Nixon that this war was going to end.
Yeah.
And then bombs Cambodia.
Yeah.
So he ties her up. Well, first she gets the knife. And he uses a broom to, like, swat it out of her hands.
Yeah. He just, like, beats her ass with a broom.
He kind of beats the shit out of her with
Sally,
his broom.
I get you jumped out a window, like, 10 minutes ago, but, like, come on.
But, like, girl.
A broom.
Then he ties her up, he gags her, and he puts her in this bag, and he throws her in the truck.
Yeah.
And I noted that he goes back and he turns off the lights, and he goes, cost of electricity is enough to drive a man out of business. Which I think is calling back to the kind of economic crisis that was going on at this time. And then we get more like him being an allegory for like Richard Nixon during Vietnam, because he's like, oh, everything's gonna be fine. And while he's like saying these like words of encouragement to her, he's just like smacking the shit out of her with this broom the whole drive in the car.
Yes. Like, anytime she makes a little bit of noise, he's like, oh, you calm down there.
Jabbing her with
you
the
comfortable
broom.
down there?
Yeah. It's so fucked up. He pulls to the end of the driveway of the farmhouse, and this is where we see the hitchhiker there from before, slinging some roadkill, acting chaotic.
Yeah, and the cook, like, starts yelling at him.
We realize that
he's like,
cook
you almost got us caught at the graveyard.
Yeah.
So we learned...
Hitchhiker was the one responsible
for the grave robbing.
For the grave robbing.
For the setup of the bodies.
And we realize that they're brothers. And the cook is the oldest brother.
Yeah.
Maybe Leatherface is the youngest brother.
Yeah.
That's why they kind of boss him around, I think.
Part of the family.
Yeah, and the hitchhiker hitches yet another ride in the back of this truck as they pull up to the front of the farmhouse. The headlights swerve into the frame, and we get close up on just one of the headlights. Speaking of the moon, it looks like the full moon.
Yep.
Yeah, kind of leading more into this whole, like, I think there's some kind of ritual going on. I think there are witches or something. We'll get into it more, because there's even more.
Witches or vampires.
Vampires, maybe. Well, he does say family of Dracula's.
Yes, so there's that theory that they could possibly be that.
I love this because while they're kind of, like, bringing Sally into the house, the older brother's like, look what your brother did to the door. And this is when Leatherface appears in some fierce drag.
Oh, Leatherface? This look 10 out of 10. 10 out of fucking 10. Such a good look. Like, she looks so...
Serving
diva.
cunt.
She is diva.
She is diva. I wrote her go-to lip sync song, Cannibal by Kesha, of course.
She's taking us to Diva Town.
Diva Town.
All right.
They bring poor Sally in and tie her bagged ass up into a chair made out of skeletons. The hitchhiker takes the bag off her head and he recognizes Sally and he's like, hey, I thought you was in a hurry. And starts like poking her and prodding her.
Messing with her. And I thought she was too. Apparently not.
The older brother is kind of bitching out Leatherface, and Leatherface communicates in this like gibberish language. It kind of sounds like Toad.
Yeah.
From Mario.
Yeah.
This is where the older brother tells the hitchhiker, go get your grandpa. I'm so excited. I love Grandpa.
They start lugging his ass down the stairs.
Yep. And while they're like lugging Grandpa down, the older brother starts comforting Sally again. And in this moment, Leatherface just kind of sashays out like, okay, I'm done for the day. And like, I'm going to bed. And the older brother's like, get your ass back in the kitchen where you belong.
Damn. I thought
Poor
you were
Leatherface. I know, I thought he was the cook.
So what do you do?
What do you do successfully?
Quickly.
What do you do successfully? Quickly.
Yeah, they go get Grandpa, and this is when they prick her finger, and they start feeding Grandpa her blood.
Starts sucking on her finger, and she's like, what the fuck?
Because we thought he was dead. We thought this dude was like a corpse. No, he's alive.
He's alive. He just looks really bad.
Old. I think he's a vampire, and I think this is all like a ritual so that they can stay young forever.
Yeah. Well, not young, but alive.
Alive, yeah. Definitely not young. But yeah, I love it because while he's sucking her blood, he starts doing this little happy dance. And that's why I love Grandpa. I love his little dance that he does.
It's so funny.
So funny. And Sally's kind of in shock, so she just passes out. And when she comes to, she's arranged at the end of the dinner table, and there's people meat served up on the platter, and they're sitting her and they're mocking her. She's screaming, and they start howling like wolves, like just mocking with her, fucking with her.
Yeah.
And then I wrote that they keep bitching each other out. We get this montage of Sally just screaming in agony. And we see that all these close-ups on her eyeball.
Yes.
Her eyeball kind of looks like the moon. Kind of shot. You know how like your eyes get kind of red? They get those little
we see like all the bloodshot in her eye.
Kind of look like solar flares, do they not?
Yes.
I thought. And this is when they decide that Grandpa should be the one to kill Sally because he's the best at killing.
Yep.
Meanwhile, Grandpa completely like impotent, like
does not know up from down, left from right.
Grandpa's like he's passed out like your grandpa passed out at Thanksgiving dinner after eating too much, passed out in front of the football game.
Yes, it's like damn.
That's the energy Grandpa's given.
It's like I'm not gonna ask him to do nothing because he can't. He won't even remember if I ask him.
And they get her down and they like lean her over a bucket and they're trying to get Grandpa to like
hit her with a mallet. And
he can't even hold the sledgehammer.
Dropping it, and Leatherface just keeps like as soon as he drops it, picks it up. And
Grandpa's literally like, I'm over it. Like
he does get a hit on her, but it's just like
he gets like one little hit,
and it's just enough to make her like bleed.
Yeah,
but like she's not like close to death.
And the hitchhiker gets really impatient. He's the one that's holding Sally down, and he goes, here, just let me do it. And
he lets her go.
And she is able to flail her way out of that room and jumps out another window. And at this point, it's breaking dawn.
It's breaking, like, part 2. The sun is starting to come up.
Yeah.
Which is very important.
I think that means
it's coming. We're near the end.
We're near the end of this horrible day, and Sally might finally catch a break.
She might escape this nightmare.
And she picks herself back up. Once again, she's got to run down the end of the driveway. Hitchhiker and Leatherface come out to chase her. Hitchhiker gets caught up to her, and he can grab her, but he chooses to just kind of slash at her back.
Yeah, and he's doing this like S move.
Yeah, kind of serpentining around her. And yeah, he has like a knife, and he's just kind of slashing at her back a little bit. They get to the road, and
this is when he like grabs her.
He's kind of grabbing her.
She's like trying to shake him off.
A semi just comes out of nowhere, and she's able to get away just in time before this semi just drives.
Plows through him. And I think this is the most brutal
hitchhiker.
Death. Because this is the most you see, and it's like...
This is the most gore, yeah.
It's like, ooh!
And it's nice, because you're like, fuck yeah. Because we hate
the truck driver, shout out. He's my favorite character. Has 0 lines, but he comes in and saves the fucking day.
Yeah. He's the unsung hero of the movie, right? The hitchhiker who's wearing like that yellow shirt.
Yes.
Or not the hitchhiker, the truck driver who's comes out and saves her. He like allows Sally to climb into the truck, and they crawl out the other side.
Then comes with the chainsaw.
Leatherface is trying to... I don't think he realizes that you can't chainsaw through this like
metal
industrial metal that this semi is made out of. And they come around the other side. He chases her, but this truck driver grabs a wrench
and just whacks
Leatherface
in the face, and he falls, and then the chainsaw Diva down cuts his leg, so now he's like injured.
That truck driver runs out off screen, out of frame, and out of this movie. We never see his ass again.
He just is like, I'm out of here.
He yeets out
because he sees the pickup coming. He's like, okay, she can get in the pickup.
And this is when someone else in a blue truck swerves around to pick up Sally.
And she's struggling to jump in, and Leatherface is like getting her, trying to get her, and she gets in just in time.
She almost barely does not get away.
Yes. And then he drives the truck. She tells him, go, keep going.
Yeah.
And he drives off, and then
she gets away.
She starts laughing, but I think it's more. It's like she's so like panicking and just like
mentally
fucked up right now.
Yeah.
And Leatherface starts like screaming and dancing, and the sun is rising.
Yeah.
And we get this final shot of like the sun, dancing in the sunrise, and then
it
ends. That's the end of the film.
That's Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Very good movie.
Crazy, because we get that vibe that, like, yeah, Sally got away, but this is going to haunt her the rest of her life.
Oh, yeah.
This woman is never going to fully recover from this experience.
No.
And at the end of the day, Leatherface and his family, I mean, Hitchhiker died, but they got away.
Yeah. Because we don't know if she was able to be like...
There's very little closure. And again, it's like that whole cyclical thing. Like, I'm sure the next day this is going to happen again.
Yeah.
These people are going to pick up another van on the road.
There's two of them.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it'll be... Yeah, that's true.
R.I.P. Hitchhiker.
R.I.P. Hitchhiker. But yeah.
I mean, maybe you could walk it off.
I don't think he's walking that one off, girl. I think he's gonzo. Sally goes up to the hitchhiker. Are you okay, girl?
Are you okay?
Are you okay?
Are you okay?
Well, yeah.
That's Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah.
Very, very good movie.
I think it's such a great, fantastic piece of fucking cinema, girl.
Yeah, very well shot. So many beautiful shots in it if you've never watched it. And it holds up. It holds up so well. Like, I understand why it's there's reasons it's inspired so many films, and so many people have taken inspiration from this film.
Created a genre.
Yep.
We would not have Halloween or Friday the 13th or Nightmare, any of those without Texas Chainsaw.
Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
So, yeah, an important movie, and I'm so glad we talked about it.
Yes.
We are gonna sign out here so we can go catch this Mariah Carey concert.
I'm so excited.
Yeah, Christmas time's in the air, girl. Next week, we're going to be doing a film from the same exact year as Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yes.
We're going to be doing Black Christmas.
A holiday classic.
Black Christmas is a movie that, along with Texas Chainsaw, truly inspired the slasher genre.
Yes.
And it also has some heavy themes and is very multifaceted.
Yes.
So it'll be a interesting one to do. I'm excited. But yeah, until then, thank you so much for joining us today on Let's Scream. We hope you had a fun time with us at Texas, at Leatherface's house. Please remember to follow the pod, like the pod, and leave a glowing review of the pod, of course. You can also send us movie requests for future episodes. You can follow me at Parker_Will_C on Instagram, and you can stream my music on all streaming platforms, Parker Will C.
And you can follow me at StevieNash95 on Instagram.
Yep. Until next time, this has been Let's Scream. Bye.